Hi there. If this is your first time here, welcome to the Parenthood and Relationship Podcast. I'm your host, Markella Kaplani, a psychologist, a parenthood and relationship coach, and a parent myself. Together, we explore the transformative journey of parenthood and its profound impact on our relationship with ourselves, our partners, and our children so that we can be present and show up as we envision without having to do more. Let's get into today's episode. Hi, and welcome back to the Parenthood and Relationship Podcast. I am so glad you're here because we're talking about something that so many parents experience but often struggle to name, and that is parental burnout. You know that feeling when you're just done? When even the smallest tasks feel like climbing a mountain, and the joy that you used to feel in parenting seems like a distant memory. Maybe you've been there, or maybe you're there right now. Parenting is hard. The constant demands, the lack of sleep, the endless responsibilities. It can wear anyone down. But here's the thing. Parental burnout doesn't mean that you're failing or that you're a bad parent. It means that you've been giving so much of yourself without taking time to fill your own cup. So today, we're going to talk about what burnout really looks like, how to recognize it, and most importantly, how to reset it. Because you deserve to feel joy and connection in parenting. And there are steps that can help you get to that direction. Whether you're listening while folding laundry, driving to pick up, or just carving out a few minutes for yourself, I want you to know that there are others who are listening to this and feel just like you. So let's figure this all out together. All right, so let's start by really understanding what parental burnout is. Because burnout isn't just about being tired or stressed. Those are very normal parts of being a parent. Burnout happens when the exhaustion becomes so overwhelming that it starts to affect everyday parts of your life, your emotions, your body, and even your mind, without your ability to be able to have control over this or to be able to connect with your kids or your partner. So what does burnout actually look like? Well, it can show up in several ways, and sometimes is actually quite sneaky. One of the more obvious signs is emotional fatigue. Maybe you've noticed that you're feeling a bit more irritable lately, or like the smallest things set you off. The constant hum of frustration can make you feel disconnected from your family or even from yourself. It's not that you don't love your kids, and it's not that you don't want to be spending every minute with them, but what is happening is that you're running on empty, and this never helps. Then there's also physical symptoms, because burnout is not just emotional. It also manifests in our bodies. You might feel like no matter how much sleep you get, you're still feeling exhausted. Or maybe you've noticed that you're getting more headaches, or there's muscle tension, or you might be even getting sick more often. Your body is waving a red flag, and it's saying that something needs to change. Moving on, there's also the mental overload. That's another symptom. Do you feel like your brain just won't stop? Maybe you're constantly forgetting things like appointments or where you put your keys. Or you might feel like you just can't focus on anything for more than a few minutes. That is the mental overload of burnout. And then there's a big one. You might feel like parenting has become a chore rather than something meaningful. Those moments that used to bring you joy, like the bedtime story or playing in the park, they might now just feel like another item on your never-ending to-do list, something you have to do for the well-being of your children. And that loss of connection can be one of the hardest parts. Now, I want to make an important distinction. Burnout is more than just stress. Stress is when you feel like there's a lot on your plate, but you're still kind of managing it. Burnout, on the other hand, is when the plate starts to feel too heavy to carry, and no matter how much you try, you just can't seem to lighten the load. If this resonates with you, that's really okay. It can happen to anyone. And I believe that at some point in time, all parents will experience some form of parental burnout to some extent. So you're not alone. And even more hopeful than that is that there is a way out of this. There is a way that you get to feel that joy of parenting again. But until then, one note that I really, really want to make is that guilt and shame have no place here. The fact that you are exhausted and that you're burnt out does not mean you are a bad parent. The fact that you used to find joy in certain activities and the fact that you absolutely adore your children can coexist with your burnout. If you're starting to find certain activities to be a chore and there's a voice inside your head saying that, oh my, this is just offensive to my child. This is just indicative of how bad of a parent I am because I should never be thinking this way about my own kid. Well, we need to answer to that voice. We can't let it just wander in there. It's really important for you to understand that not every situation is the same and that there are conditions in every situation that play a role in how we receive things. If you're feeling sick and you're feeling down, the extra noise that is happening outside your apartment because of the construction could cause you a headache, whereas it wouldn't on a normal day. If you are depressed and someone criticizes your work, you might cry, whereas at another point in time, you may have not. In that same light, if you're burnt out, certain things will feel more like a drag, and that has nothing to do with your children. It doesn't mean that you think of them as a chore. It doesn't mean that you don't appreciate criticism because at a state where you are more vulnerable, it hurts more, and it may have led to you crying. You still appreciate the criticism and want this feedback. It's a more sensitive time now, and it doesn't mean that you won't continue to accept feedback and constructive criticism, but it does mean that you might want to take precautions psychologically to shield yourself from feeling like nobody loves you because they're giving you this criticism. In that same light, it's really important that you are compassionate with yourself when you're going through this and you let go of this guilt and shame. And the first step to letting go of it, because this is very theoretical, is for you to be able to say, hey, this is not the case. Answer to that voice inside your head that is going rampant and saying, if you're looking at this and you're huffing and puffing, it means you're a bad parent. Don't allow that to just exist because it festers. And it's not true. Okay, so after that little rant, because you know how passionate I feel about parental guilt and shame and how much I am dedicated to helping parents rid themselves of this guilt and shame that we carry and actually gets in the way of us being the best version of parent that we can be. Now, let's move on and talk about what burnout really looks like. Burnout happens when we're juggling impossible expectations, both from the world around us and from within ourselves, without the support that we really need. Especially for us moms, the pressure can feel very overwhelming because there is a lot of social pressure that's happening here. We're expected to just do it all, to nurture our kids and to manage the home, to have a career, and somehow still find time for self-care and to be the best partner that we can be to our husbands. And if we fall short in any of these areas, it starts to feel like the world is judging. And sometimes, let me not gaslight you, the world is judging. Social media doesn't make this any easier. It doesn't allow us to kind of ignore as easily as we would have in the past. In the past, you're walking down the street with your child on the stroller and strangers will stop you and give you unsolicited advice. You may have taken it to heart and you may have had your mom or your mother-in-law and aunts, uncles, cousins, siblings telling you their own opinions that you would have and are affected by, but you can tune them out There are moments in time when this unsolicited advice will happen, like family gatherings, for example, or going out on a walk. And you can shield yourself when you're not feeling like you're really up for it. When you're feeling like you're in a more sensitive stage, you find your ways to shield yourself from that. However, now comes in social media, yet another layer. Because social media is something that most of us are on. A lot of times, because we are exhausted, we might be doom scrolling on social media even more. And what social media does is that it has this endless stream of perfectly curated family moments. So it's no wonder that we as mothers may start to feel like we're not doing enough, because there's always that something more that we see other mothers doing seemingly very easily and naturally. And so even if we're giving everything that is up to our capacity, we might feel like it's not enough because we see that other moms are doing more. We don't know what's going on in the background, how much support they have, how willing they are to receive support, because let's not forget that there are women and mothers who are not very willing to accept support. Some of them because they've been taught that accepting support means that you're weak. Some of them because they've been taught that motherhood means sacrificing yourself. And so even if this is hard, you're supposed to do it because you're a mom. Some of us, because we have put ourselves in so much guilt and shame about not loving every part of motherhood, that we're kind of punishing ourselves into submission, into loving every moment and pushing ourselves in that direction, doing it all because we're supposed to, and we will eventually love every moment. That's what's supposed to happen. For many reasons, there are many mothers who may have been able to get support either from family members or because there is some financial capacity to be able to get help, but there are underlying reasons that don't allow them. And so if that's you, or if you are not able to get support, either side, you may be looking at your cell phone, you may be scrolling through social media, and you may be seeing these moms who are holding the baby and they're cooking. I'm remembering a very specific reel that I saw, and I was like, oh my God. I mean, what does this do to all the other moms, those of us who wake up with black circles under our eyes because we've hardly slept and our hair is in a bun, and not a pretty one, and we're just basically just surviving the day. Although we would have normally been very proud of ourselves for having cooked a meal or for having carried the baby all day long without breaking down, now we're seeing that this mom is not only carrying her baby, she's also baking a very healthy meal. She is dressed up. She has her hair done. She has makeup on. And it's so unrealistic for so many moms out there, but it will still trigger us. It will still create this very subconscious, sometimes very conscious as well, message which is, why can she do it? What's wrong with me? But let's not forget that dads don't necessarily have it easy either. The expectations can look just as heavy for them, even though they do look different. Society positions dads as providers. They're the ones who are supposed to keep the family secure. Usually that means financially. But at the same time, in our society at the moment, there is growing pressure for men to be much more emotionally available, especially in regards to their children. And that's a good thing. We want men to start to become more deeply involved in day-to-day parenting. However, balancing the expectation that hasn't necessarily diminished, even though women are in the workforce and women are providing financially, the expectation of men to be the providers hasn't necessarily diminished very much. And so men can feel like they're being pulled in very different directions. I'm thinking of several instances of men who have wives who are making the same amount of money or more than they are, who have chosen to return to work after having children. And so the financial issue shouldn't have been such a big concern for them. You wouldn't expect these men who have the financial support from their wives' side to necessarily feel so pressured that they have to be the providers, but they still do, because this is how society has been constructed. Since we were living in caves, this is the role that men played in human society. It's ingrained in our genes. And when we think of it this way, and when we consider what does it mean to be the provider, what does it mean to offer stability and security, it means that I don't necessarily have the permission to be vulnerable. But when I get home from work, I'm supposed to suddenly just shift and be vulnerable. I'm supposed to let all of that go and be very willing to be here in the present. And this is something that I've argued for women as well, who are expected to just be juggling roles all day and switching from being powerful and doing all the things that society expects us to do. This is even for stay-at-home moms, because we are being told to do so many things. And then when it comes to the baby, we're supposed to be mellow and flowy and nurturing. And so there's a very big disconnect between those two expectations. And I'm hoping that now you can see that this is very easily going to lead to burnout. Parenting in itself is hard. It's very difficult. But there are a lot of parts that have become way, way harder because of the societal expectations and the pressure to keep on doing more and performing and flaunting outcomes, because that is what we're doing. But beyond the societal pressures, there is the story that we tell ourselves, the inner dialogue that keeps us stuck in burnout. For example, you might be saying, I should be able to handle this. Others are. Why am I not? I should be able to handle it. I shouldn't need any help. I alluded to this before. My kids always have to come first. These beliefs often come from a place of love. They're very well intentioned. We want to be the best parents that we can be, the parents that our children truly deserve. But they also make it very hard for us to ask for help, to set boundaries, or to even acknowledge that we're struggling. You might be feeling guilty for taking a break, as though stepping away means that you're letting your family down. Or it might mean that you're suppressing your emotions because you believe that your role is supposed to fix problems and not share your struggles. Now we get to the perfect storm. So take all of these societal pressures that you are currently being bombarded with. Take all the internalized messages, all the messages you have received from childhood, from generations that are in your genes, from what you have heard, and you have made it your own. So take these core beliefs that you now hold, and here is where you have the perfect storm for burnout. You're constantly trying to meet expectations that no one can realistically achieve, and when cracks start to show, it feels like it's your fault. But the truth is, parenting was never meant to be done in isolation. And the weight that you're carrying and how heavy it feels isn't a reflection of your worth as a parent. Recognizing the pressure is the first step to pushing back and creating the space for change. So then, why does burnout happen? What's the takeaway here? Well, it's not because you're failing. It's because the expectations placed on parents nowadays are often completely unrealistic, and the support systems that used to help carry the load aren't as strong as they once were. Where is that village that everyone is talking about? And how likely is it that we can create our own village when society supports individualism so much? There's a lot that we need to break down internally before we can come to create our own village. But the good news is that once we understand these pressures, we can start to push back against them and create that space for change, like I said. So now what I want to do is get to the practical stuff. How do we reset the burnout and reclaim ourselves? Because while burnout might feel overwhelming, it's not permanent. There are steps that we can take to recharge and reclaim ourselves, even in the midst of full chaos, not just in parenting, but internally. Step 1 is to recognize and acknowledge that we are burned out. And it's the most important thing to name it and accept it. Parental burnout often comes with a lot of guilt of failure, which then can make it very hard to admit that we're struggling. But recognizing burnout for what it is, which is just a sign that we've been giving too much without replenishing ourselves. This isn't weakness. It's actually strength. So as a practical tip, I invite you to reflect on how you've been feeling lately. Ask yourself, when is the last time that I truly felt rested? Have I maybe been snapping at my kids or my partner more than usual? Do I feel disconnected from the things that I used to enjoy? These questions can help you identify whether you're in a state of burnout so that you can first start to accept it, and then we can get to addressing it. Step 2 is to prioritize your basic needs. When we're burnt out, even our most basic needs like sleep or nourishment or rest often fall to the bottom of the list. Reclaiming these essentials might sometimes feel selfish. And as I'm saying this, you might feel like, oh my God, it's irrational. No, it's not selfish. But I do want you to deeply reflect on how you feel about these things. I invite you to consider how your actions support your thoughts. If your thought is that this is necessary, I need to be well nourished in every sense of the word so that I can provide for my children, do your actions support that? Are you truly nourishing yourself so that you can show up better for your kids? Or at the end of the day, does it feel like you put yourself last because your kids have to go first? If the latter is happening, it means that you value self-sacrifice, martyrdom, more than you do nourishment. Your mind may be saying, I understand the concept of put your mask on first so that then you can help everybody else around you. But what you're actually doing supports the exact opposite, which means that on a deeper level, on a more subconscious level, which means at a level that actually controls your actions, you believe that putting yourself last is actually making you a better mother, a better human. And so we need to acknowledge that this may be happening, take it out in the open, so that we can address why it is that I feel this way. And this is where therapy a lot of times comes into play and can be much more effective than a self-help book or listening to this on a podcast. Because while this is a great beginning and it really can help a lot of people who are very determined to do this work on their own, what therapy does is that in that safe space where you are with a professional, you can start to untangle all of this and personally see what is lying behind the curtain for you when it comes to such core beliefs that are keeping you stuck in places that promote parental burnout. It's not the same for you and for me. And to the dismay of many, unfortunately, just understanding what the root may be. So, this goes back to, let's say, my mother wound, my father wound, a trauma that I had in first grade. Understanding this does not automatically resolve the problem. It would have been great. I think that we're doing a much better job at being self-aware. We are much more psychologically educated so that we can analyze things ourselves. The average person is able to go back and link something that's showing up for them right now to something that has happened in the past, which is wonderful. It's a great first step. But then does that automatically resolve the problem just because I figured it out? Unfortunately, no, because we're too deep in it. So what I am trying to do through this podcast is to provide you with that spark, to be able to see what it is that's plaguing you, to be able to slowly figure out the roots. And my hope is that I add another layer to that and that you find peace in the fact that a lot of your experiences are expected to happen. They're part of the process. They are natural. They don't mean that you're doing a bad job or that you're failing. They mean that you're going through the motions. So moms, it's okay to let go of the idea that everything has to be perfect. Maybe tonight's dinner isn't homemade, or maybe the laundry will have to just wait another day to get folded. These small acts of letting go can create room for your own rest. And it's not that great of a rest physically, but psychologically, it can be a huge leap. Dads, it's okay that you take time for yourself without feeling guilty. Whether you're going to bed a little bit earlier or taking a quiet moment after work or prioritizing a workout, these habits don't take away from your family. They help you show up stronger. Now, of course, in saying this, I do know that there are a lot of family structures where there are grievances for the lack of priority setting, where the one partner, usually the wife, as the mother who is expected from society to just give herself to the family, is taking on a lot. And the other partner, usually the dad, the husband, is not taking on enough and maybe going to work and then may not be coming back home, but, having dinner with coworkers, going to a workout, doing all the things, and then coming back and having minimal time to support the family. And this huge gap in responsibility for the family and the home could be creating a lot of dissonance in the family. Now, that's a different story. So I wanted to make sure that I also point that out. A practical thing that you can do if you're finding that you're having a difficult time prioritizing your basic needs is to choose one small thing that you can focus on for this week. Maybe it's asking your partner to take the kids, asking someone else to take care of the kids so that you can get an hour of sleep. Or when they are away, instead of slaving away in the home, in the kitchen, doing all the things, running errands outside the home, you can come back and get yourself a nap. It can be hydrating better. It can be eating lunch without multitasking, finding a way that you get to actually sit down and have your lunch. Small, consistent changes can make a big difference over time because they set the tone of I am taking care of myself. I am connecting with myself. And there's an episode where I talk a lot about self-care in the sense of self-connecting in a very rational way for busy parents that doesn't involve having to do these big routines that just when you hear them, you block them out because they seem so unrealistic. And because of that, I've actually created a self-connect calendar where I propose small things that you can do that are not necessarily mind-blowing and you wouldn't expect them to do much, but because they're so small and you can actually apply them consistently, there is great psychological symbolism there that I am doing something for me. And they can be very emotionally and mentally relieving to do. Now, step 3 is to set boundaries. Burnout thrives when we say yes to everything. Learning to say no, whether that's to extra commitments or saying no to unrealistic expectations. And that could be even while you're scrolling and you see a reel like the one that I described before, just to out loud say no. No, I don't accept this as my reality, as the reality. And even saying no to your own inner critic, to not let that voice go rampant, like we said before. This is a key part of resetting. Examples of boundaries, for instance, could be skipping a play date that you feel would be more work than fun. Another one could be setting a no work rule for all adult family members after dinner so that you can focus on family connection. And what does that do? Well, when we don't set the rule, we could be sitting down with our family after dinner, but we may not be connecting because in our minds at that time, we could have been doing A, B, C, D, E. When we set the rule that after dinner, that's it, the day has ended, this is where I'm supposed to be, we can be much more present. Intention matters. And so set the intention for yourself. Find out where you need to have the intention because otherwise it just feels off. There's just guilt and shame involved. There's just this angst that there should be something more. And in terms of you guys as the couple, as partners, it's really important that you talk about these boundaries that need to be set as a team. Maybe one of you needs uninterrupted time to recharge, while the other one handles the kids. Sharing the load can help both of you avoid burnout. And getting to step 4, which is reconnecting with the joy that we used to find in parenthood. Burnout will often take away the joy that we used to once find in parenting. But reclaiming that joy doesn't have to mean that you have to do like this big, grand, elaborate change. It's about finding small moments that bring light back into your day. This involves rediscovering yourself. What's one thing that you used to love before parenting took over? Was it listening to music, reading, going on a walk? Carving out even 10 minutes at a time for these activities can create a ripple effect of change. At the same time, when we're considering this in the family perspective, as in reconnecting with your kids and finding more joy as you spend time with them instead of feeling like, oh yeah, I know I want to be here, but I also want to be somewhere else. So then you're never happy. Even when you are with your kids, you're not happy there. And when you're doing that something else, be it a project or a fun activity that you used to enjoy, you're there, but you're not really there. You're not actually enjoying it. So in order to bring all that back, it's really important to just stay present. Sometimes it's as simple as just sitting on the floor and playing with your kids for a few minutes, sharing a laugh, telling a story about your childhood, because these are moments that remind us of what it is that we love about parenting. And these can help us stay present when we are with our children, so that when we do have the time, do give ourselves the permission to go on and do the other thing, we don't feel like it's at the expense of our children. We have filled their cup because we were able to also find joy in the moment, and now we're filling our cup, and all of a sudden, that's okay. Finally, step 5 is to build a support system, because we want this to be permanent. Parenting used to be done in a village, but many of us are faced with carrying the load on our own. Finding or building a support system can really help lighten the load. And it's really important that if you're facing resistance to this, that you figure out the reasons why. As a first step, it's really important to lean on your partner. And this begins by just checking in with each other. At the beginning of the week or on Sunday, as you're listening to this, ask one another, what can I take from your plate this week? Sometimes just feeling seen and supported by your partner, just that intention for me to take something from you, is enough to ease the stress. But then again, our partners may not necessarily always be available to take on what we need to let go of. So community support also becomes quite important. Think about who else you might be able to lean on. Maybe it's a friend that you can vent to. Maybe it's a neighbor who can help with carpooling, or even a parenting group where you can share experiences. Asking for help is not a sign of weakness. Accepting support is not a sign that you are failing. It's actually a sign of strength. It's a sign of flexibility. It's a sign of psychological wellness. Finally, I wouldn't call this step 6, but I would put it there along with an asterisk. Seeking professional support in some cases could prove extremely valuable. Sometimes burnout feels too overwhelming to tackle alone. Untangling all the reasons why I feel so stuck could be quite difficult for me because I am entangled. Therapy can provide that space to unpack the emotional and mental load of parenting and to be able to be the observer of our own life and understand the roots of why we are acting and feeling the way that we are in the now. Healing past wounds that have carved a path for us that we are not necessarily served by anymore. Therapy can help create a plan to move forward. And that could be individual therapy where we process our own individual feelings and look at our own individual history, or it could be couples therapy to strengthen our partnership. And in my case, there's the couple intensive where you get to do both. But even if that seems like a lot, but you are considering that this might be good for you guys, maybe a first step would be going to a parenting workshop where you can learn strategies for managing your stress, or you can learn strategies so that you can divide labor more equally or more satisfactorily for one another. Whatever form it takes, professional support can be an invaluable resource. So, as we wrap up today's episode, I want to remind you of something that's really important. Parental burnout does not mean that you're failing. It doesn't mean that you're a bad parent. It just means that you've been running on empty and giving everything without taking a second to go to the gas station and fill your tank up. So parental burnout is just an indication. It's that sign on your car that will say, you need to fuel me up. It's a sign to pause, reflect, reset, not to push harder. Now that you know the signs of burnout, now that you know why it happens and how you can reset it, I want to leave you with this. You are allowed to take care of yourself. In fact, you have to take care of yourself because so long as you're running on empty, it's impossible for you to show up fully for your family. What will you be able to offer if you allow yourself to end up hollow? By choosing to reset, you're not just helping yourself. You're creating a healthier, more connected home for your kids and for your partner. So here is my challenge for you this week. Pick one small step from today's conversation. Maybe it's getting a little extra rest. Maybe it's saying no to a commitment. Or it could be finding a moment to reconnect with joy in your day. Reconnect with the things that you used to love. Just one thing. And when you do it, notice how it feels. Be intentional about it. It just might be the first drop in a bucket of a fuller, more balanced life. If today's episode resonated with you, I'd love to hear about it. You can find all the ways that you can contact me in the description, in the show notes, wherever it is that you listen to this podcast. And I want to know, what is it that you're choosing to try out this week? Share it with me on social media, send me a message, comment on YouTube. I'd love to support you and cheer you on. Thank you so much for spending this time with me on the Parenthood and Relationship Podcast. And just remember, you're doing an amazing job. I'll see you next Sunday.